The title of my presentation is A Personalized Vocabulary Learning Experience, and the title of the article that I researched and reviewed was Personalized Vocabulary Learning in the Middle School Classroom. It was written by Robert Chesbrough, and basically the article introduces his vocabulary development technique, which is called In a Word, in a Symbol. And he goes through describing how his technique succeeds where others fall short. He describes just his past experiences with learning vocabulary and how it failed him, and also an experience that he had in which there was emotion and meaning behind learning the vocabulary, and that really stuck with him through life. And he also explains each step of In a Word, in a Symbol, which I'll go through with you guys. Then he finally explains how we as teachers can introduce and implement this strategy in our classroom. In a Word, in a Symbol is a template in which students are given several opportunities to understand a new vocabulary term, specifically science in his classroom, by integrating it across different modalities. I think that this is really important for science words in particular because we do not use them in our everyday lives necessarily. Certain ones are in a vacuum of the subject area of science. It's important to help students rephrase them, symbolize them, and relate them to their own lives. That really gives them the deeper knowledge that they need of the word and its definition. The first step before the students do anything is they do receive that list of new vocabulary words and definitions prior to beginning the activity. And this just cuts down on wasted time, not necessarily wasted, but just allows the time to be used productively towards that specific activity that you're doing in your classroom, instead of using time to look up the words in a dictionary and then write the definitions down, which those are important tasks, but just specifically for accomplishing this activity, the time needs to be used very productively, and so they're given that list so they can read through it and kind of start to gain an understanding of the definitions and the words and familiarize themselves with those words. Then they summarize the definition of the vocabulary word into a new single word. This requires students to use a higher depth of knowledge level, and this is done by comprehending the word and the definition, evaluating its meaning, and then synthesizing that meaning into a new term, a summary. During this process, during this step, teacher-student discussion is really encouraged to shepherd the students to where they need to be. Some of them will suggest words that might not really make sense, or they need to be further honed into what the vocabulary word actually means. So the teacher can discuss with that student and with the class to help them all get on the same page and understand really what they're trying to do. The one-word summary that they come up with is the first product during this activity of that deeper understanding of the new term. And then they symbolize the vocabulary word using an original visual. The main objective of this symbol is to associate the one-word summary back to the original vocabulary term in a creative way that will stick with that individual student. All of these are going to be unique to the student. They don't necessarily have to relate to the definition of the term. It's more just of an association tool. And Chesbrough really suggests the use of color to purposefully enhance the association process. So like Madison said before, they can't just use a random color to symbolize another random word. It has to be meaningful and purposeful, and that's where it really helps them associate those two terms. Lastly, they're going to relate it to their own lives, and they are going to make a weird personal connection between the new term and their daily life, something that's happened to them or something that they own, just something that will further help them relate that term and commit it to their memory so they can bring that back up when they're trying to remember it in the future. And this can be a few sentences or a picture, and they can write about something in their lives that relates to the vocabulary term. And before this step and every other step that I've talked about, it's really important to provide an example so the students are encouraged and they realize I can actually accomplish this, and they can have something to relate back to. If they kind of get confused about what they're supposed to be doing, they can look at that example, and that'll help them guide them through the activity. And that example was the word variable in the article, and like Madison described, and that just gives the students efficacy and reassures them that it is a higher level of thinking, but they are able to accomplish it with assistance from the teacher and with examples. In the conclusion of the article, Chesbrough walks the reader through the way that they can implement this strategy in their own classroom. And it can be used as an assessment, as a cooperative lesson, or in any other way that the teacher sees fit in the classroom or has time for. It can be turned into a game if you use a small group setting and have prizes for who comes up with the best symbolization or anything that you can come up with. The reason this activity works is because it uses these multiple modalities, so the student is able to relate and incorporate this word in several different ways, which really helps them internalize the meaning and just relate it to their own life and remember it in a way that is special to them and involves their emotions and their thought process. I have an example the example that was in the article, first of all, which was variable, and then the definition is something that changes in a controlled experiment, and the word that is in the example, the summary word, is changer. And then you can kind of see, not very well, but it's the V with the pocket change, like Madison explained. And then the personal connection is about the phone charger and changing the different variables to see what's wrong and why the phone isn't charging. And then I decided to use this does look like a third or fourth grader may have written it, but it was me, because I've got handwriting. I used the word coruscate from our book, and the definition of coruscate: to give off or reflect light in bright beams or flashes. And the one-word summary I came up with was the verb sparkle, because that's always how I've thought of it. And then the symbol is like a sparkly ice skate. Then the connection that I made was I have a shirt that has sequins on it, and when I go outside and the sunlight hits it, it reflects the light, and the sequins flash in the light. And there's instructions up at the top that were included in the article that pretty much describe everything I went through with you guys in the presentation.
Was the chart in your article?
It was. Just the chart and the original example.
So actually you could use that as a template with your students. Or you could put it like on a wiki and have students have different words and they could all contribute to one group.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, especially if they were studying for some sort of test to see their classmates' examples, and those could help them as well.